Hi, my name is Moritz and I'm a jewelry artist based in Germany. In this video I want to show you how I make a pair of earrings from gold and tourmalines. When I started in jewelry about 10 years ago, YouTube really wasn't a thing for me, but over time it's become one of my main sources of entertainment and education at the same time. Ironically, the only area where I can't find any real good YouTube content is my own. Jewelers have this weird sense of protectionism and secrecy about their work, so everything that's on YouTube is either highly polished or very old-fashioned in my opinion. So in the sense of some of my favorite YouTubers, I want to show a more modern drift on this traditional craft. I want to make an entertaining and somewhat informative product here, but I'm alone in the workshop, so bear with me if you don't see those fancy swoopy shots or crazy montages of my face scrunched up at work. Let's get right to it. I'll talk over some parts and explain what I'm doing on the way, but if you have any further questions or need help sourcing or making a tool, just ask in the comments and I'll try to answer. The first step in every build is usually acquiring the material. Here I am using 18 karat yellow gold. When I can, I like to go to the bank and just buy raw fine gold so I can make my own alloys. This gives me more control over the process and is quite a bit more economic for me as well. I'll cast an ingot and roll it down to the desired size. My rolling mill here has two different sets of rollers. The one on the top is for sheet metal and the one on the bottom has dies for rolling down rods of metal. The usual rule of thumb here is to try and deform the material by about 50% before you anneal again, to keep the grain structures in the metal small. But depending on the type of alloy, that's not always possible, so stop before it starts to show cracks. I plan to set two tourmalines into a relatively simple pair of ear hangers with a claw setting. When you want to set a gemstone into a piece of jewelry, there are a few basic ways to accomplish that. The one I want to use here is to make posts that align with the rim of the gemstone and have a little notch filed into them, and thus allow for the so-called claw to be pushed over the stone's girdle. Those claws are usually at every corner of the gemstone and allow for a maximum of stability in the setting. But I find stuff made the usual way very boring, so with my earrings I offset the rules a little. I'm tilting the gems at an angle and only using the opposing corners for the setting. Also, I'm confident that I can properly set the gem using only 4 claws. What you just saw me do before soldering is file notches into the pieces of gold wire, so the angles for bending are way sharper and look much cleaner. Then I soldered the individual parts of the setting and the cage itself. Soldering in jewelry work is done with a special alloy that contains the same grade of fine metals as the material you want to solder with, but has a lower melting temperature as not to actually melt the pieces you want to join. For consecutive soldering operations, there are several solder types available that each have a lower melting point than the last one. We call them hard, medium and soft solder. Not to be confused with the soldering in plumbing or electronics, where solder types with melting points at around 300 degrees Celsius are used. I am soldering on a block of charcoal here. The charcoal has a tendency to react with the surrounding oxygen and thus keeps my part from oxidizing too much. The coal can also be shaped to accommodate most soldering needs, like the little groove I am carving in to align my pieces of the setting. In between almost all of the steps, I like to clean up what I can. A lot of the time it is way harder to reach certain spots further down the line of the process. For those rough cleaning operations, when I like to keep the lines sharp and the geometry intact, I use rubberized abrasives like the blue wheel you just saw in the motor handpiece. Test fit the stones by milling the seating grooves into the setting before I advance further. If the setting does not fit like it should, now it would be relatively easy to redo the part. By now I have used about 2 grams of gold, so only around 100 euros in material would be for the recycling bin. When I'm certain I can make the setting fit the gem perfectly, I'm moving on to make the hanger part. For this part, the wire should be no thicker than 1 millimeter, because it has to go through earlobes. I bend the hanger part with pliers that have a flat on one side and a half round part on the other. It's important that you don't actually bend with fully closed pliers, but rather bend around the lightly closed half round side. If you clamp down hard, you will get dents that remain visible on the otherwise perfectly round wire. The tricky part here is matching the form of the hangers to the design and then to the second part that you have just made. The front part of the earrings you just saw me fit together is made from a piece of iron wire. I plan to blue the iron in the end to give some nice color contrast to the piece. Iron can be soldered relatively well to precious metal if you have the right flux. I'm using Bracetech H and the same solder I used for the gold parts. Now that all the pieces are fit up, soldered and matching, I have to pre-polish them before it's on to setting the stone. This is a block of wood with a heavy base and some Mounter's mastic on top. It's a substance made from brick dust, talc and natural resins that melt when heated up. Using a heat gun instead of a flame like I used to do prevents the substance from burning off. I pile it up a little and press my pieces in so when it cools back down I have a perfectly stable ground for setting the stones. Tourmalines are a relatively soft material as far as gemstones go and cannot really handle pressure in the wrong way, so I'm taking a bit of a risk with my weird setting here. So after the stones are securely set with no incident whatsoever, everything that is left to do is a final finish. I have to half melt, half break them off the wood block and clean the rest of the material off in acetone. For this video I wanted to show you guys the process of a piece of jewelry from the maker's perspective and explain most of the steps on the way. I find that there are not a lot of makers and especially jewelers out there that actually explain what they're doing. Hope you found this interesting or at least a bit entertaining. Let me know if you have any questions or want to see something special for the next video. I plan to try a few different formats and see what works for me on this channel. Thanks for watching and have fun with your own projects. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned or enjoyed something on the way. Let me know what you want to see for the next one.